Late one Saturday night in Fuengirola, Spain, punters were leaving Monaghan's Irish bar after watching the Champions League final. At around 11:30 p.m, a car pulled up and a masked gunman emerged, opening fire at point-blank range. 2 Scottish men were hit and killed. Ross Monaghan, the bar's 40-year-old Glaswegian owner, and his friend Eddie Lyons Jr. The shooter fled into the night, leaving holidaymakers horrified at the carnage outside the popular pub. This double assassination on the Costa del Sol sent shockwaves through the underworld. It was allegedly linked to a quarter-century Gangland Feud rooted 2,000 kilometers away in Glasgow. Both Monaghan and Lyons Jr. were long-standing members of the Lyons crime family, one of Glasgow's most notorious organized crime gangs. For over 20 years, the Lyons had been locked in a deadly tit-for-tat war with their bitter rivals, the Daniel crime family. The feud between these two gangs has claimed multiple lives and seen homes and businesses firebombed, drive-by shootings, and machete attacks on city streets. Ordinary Glaswegians have watched in fear as this underworld conflict repeatedly spills into public view. The bad blood between the Lyons and Daniel families can be traced back to the summer of 2001. At that time, the Daniel crime family, led by veteran gangster Jamie Daniel, dominated Glasgow's drug trade. They primarily dealt in heroin during the 1980s and 90s, flooding housing schemes with cheap smack. By 2001, however, cocaine had arrived on the Scottish scene, promising far bigger profits. Jamie Daniel's crew was storing a batch of cocaine worth roughly £20,000 in a safe house in the Milton area of North Glasgow. According to investigators, a group of young thugs connected to the Lyons family caught wind of this stash. These youths, including a teenaged Ross Monaghan and his close friend Eddie Lyons Jr., were part of a Milton youth gang nicknamed the Club Boys, who hung around the Churnside Community Centre in Milton. In mid-2001, someone raided the Daniel safe house and lifted the cocaine, which was then sold on the street without kicking up payment to the Daniels. The Daniels demanded repayment and vengeance. The Lyons crew, however, refused to make it right. This minor drug theft ignited a wider turf war for control of Glasgow's drug trade. Each side began arming themselves and plotting retribution. Gangland debts and reputation were at stake. If the Daniels did nothing, they would appear weak, and other upstarts might try to rob them too. Retaliation was inevitable. In the immediate aftermath, Glasgow witnessed a series of tit-for-tat attacks between the Lyons and Daniel factions. Both gangs were feeling each other out, and the violence escalated gradually over the next few years. One especially notorious figure emerged during this period: Kevin Gerbil Carroll, a feared enforcer for the Daniel family. Carroll, then in his 20s, had a personal motive. He had reportedly been bullied by members of the Lyons family in school and now relished the chance for payback. Known on the streets as Gerbil due to his protruding teeth, Carroll became hell-bent on punishing the Lyons crew. He gained infamy for staging terrifying kidnappings dubbed alien abductions, where rival dealers or Lyons associates were snatched off the street, tortured brutally, then dumped half-naked on the roadside. Victims of these abductions were typically so traumatized and terrified of retribution that they refused to tell police what had happened. Carroll's sadistic tactics sent a clear message. Crossing the Daniel gang would invite nightmares. By 2006, the feud was reaching a boiling point. That year, Kevin Carroll struck at the Lyons in an especially despicable manner. In November 2006, Carroll and a crew of Daniel associates drove to a cemetery in Lanarkshire, where Eddie Lyons Jr.'s younger brother Gary was buried. Gary Lyons had died of leukemia at age 8 back in 1991. Under cover of darkness, Carroll's crew used a 4x4 vehicle and tow rope to rip Gary Lyons' headstone out of the ground, toppling the child's grave. This grave desecration was widely credited with taking the rivalry to another level. Even hardened criminals were shocked defiling an innocent child's grave crossed all boundaries of gangland honor. The Lyons family was outraged and deeply hurt by this act. It was clear that Carroll was taunting them, seeking to provoke a deadly response. On December 6, 2006, two gunmen wearing rubber old man masks stormed into Applerow Motors, a garage in Lambhill, North Glasgow, owned by a Lyons family member. Inside were members of the Lyons clan. The masked assailants opened fire with handguns, spraying bullets in broad daylight. 21-year-old Michael Lyons was shot dead on the spot. Two other men were seriously wounded. Stephen Lyons, then 26, a brother of Eddie Jr., was hit in the stomach, and family associate Robert Pickett was also shot. Police later confirmed it was part of a war between the notorious Daniel and Lyons crime families. The masked hitmen, Raymond "Hammy" Anderson and James McDonald, were well-known Daniel lieutenants. Both men fled Glasgow after the murder, but within 2 years they were caught and brought to justice. In 2008, they were convicted of Michael Lyons' murder and each jailed for life with minimum 35-year terms. During their trial, the judge described the killing as a cold-blooded, premeditated execution. It was the longest sentence for murder in Scottish history at that time, reflecting the outrage over the gangland violence. For the Lyons family, Michael's slaying was devastating, their first major loss in the feud. Michael Lyons was the first cousin of Eddie Jr. and Stephen, and by all accounts, a relatively innocent young man who just happened to be in the wrong place when the gunmen came. The Daniels had drawn blood, and the Lyons clan was now determined to retaliate in kind. Over the next few years, tensions simmered as both factions regrouped. The Lyons crew nursed their wounds, and Gerbil Carroll continued to wage a campaign of terror against Lyons-linked dealers across Glasgow. But Gerbil's days were numbered. On January the 13th, 2010, shoppers were jolted by the sound of gunfire. Kevin Carroll, then 29, had driven to the store in his Audi to meet two drug associates. As he sat in his car in the Asda car park, two masked gunmen ambushed him. Carroll was shot at least 10 times at close range while trapped in his Audi. The hit was ruthlessly efficient, carried out in broad daylight in front of numerous witnesses, including families. Carroll died on the scene, slumped in the bullet-riddled vehicle. It was a public execution of the Daniel clan's most feared enforcer. Police later said the hit team showed military-style precision. Given Kevin Carroll's violent history, suspects were abundant. Investigators at one point had almost 100 potential suspects who might have wanted Gerbil dead. Police eventually honed in on two prime suspects tied to the Lyons faction. One was Ross Monaghan, the same man who years later would die in the Costa del Sol shooting. In his mid-20s, he was arrested and charged with Carroll's murder. He went on trial in 2012, however, at the High Court trial, the evidence was shaky. After a 3-week proceeding, the judge ruled there was insufficient evidence to convict Monaghan. In May 2012, he was formally acquitted of Carroll's murder, but police still believed the Lyons were behind Carroll's assassination, even if Monaghan could not be nailed for it. The second suspect was a more shadowy Lyons hitman, William "Buff" Paterson. Paterson, a longtime Lyons associate and a fellow member of the old Milton Club Boys, disappeared shortly after Carroll's murder. He fled abroad, evading authorities for several years. Eventually, Paterson was captured in Spain and brought to trial back in Scotland. In 2015, he was convicted of Carroll's murder and received life in prison, minimum 22 years. A mugshot of Paterson later featured in Scottish newspapers, labeling him the hitman who took out Gerbil. With Paterson's conviction, law enforcement finally had someone behind bars. Some hoped that Gerbil's death might draw a line under the feud, allowing cooler heads to prevail. The years immediately after 2010 saw a relative lull in open violence between the Lyons and Daniels. Both sides were likely wary of further tit-for-tat murders with police scrutiny so high. Jamie Daniel, the patriarch of the Daniel clan, was aging and battling health issues. On the Lyons side, several members were dealing with legal troubles. For example, Eddie Lyons Sr. was prosecuted for unrelated financial crimes around that time. Glasgow police were determined to suppress the feud. Investigations into both gangs continued, not only for violence, but also for their extensive drug trafficking and money laundering. Several key players were jailed on various charges, temporarily taking them off the streets. The crime landscape was shifting, and younger ambitious criminals began eyeing the top spots. Within the Daniel camp, a monumental change came in July 2016. Jamie Daniel, the longtime boss of the Daniel crime family, died of cancer at age 58. His death marked the end of an era. Jamie had been a cunning, old-school crime lord. Under his watch, the feud had been kept in check to some degree, perhaps because of mutual assured destruction. With him gone, a leadership vacuum emerged atop the Daniel hierarchy. Meanwhile, on the Lyons side, Stevie Lyons, a close relative of Eddie Lyons Jr., had become a prominent figure. Stevie Lyons had actually survived an attempt on his life back in 2006 at the Lambhill garage attack, and afterward spent years abroad recovering. By the 2010s, Stevie Lyons was reportedly based overseas, first Spain, then Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, to escape Scotland's spotlight. Despite the distance, Stephen Lyons was believed to be directing Lyons clan operations from afar, communicating with his Glasgow underlings. From Dubai, Stevie Lyons forged international drug connections, including ties to Ireland's powerful Kinahan cartel. With Jamie Daniel gone, the Lyons clan sensed weakness in their longtime enemies. In the final months of 2016, Lyons loyalists embarked on an aggressive campaign to settle scores and seize control of drug territory from the Daniel faction. According to prosecutors, the Lyons crew launched 5 attempted murders in just 5 months. One particularly savage attack came on May 18, 2017. Stephen Bonzo Daniel, a nephew of the late Jamie Daniel and a central figure in the Daniel family, was ambushed in a scene straight out of an action movie. Late that night, Stephen Daniel was driving home from a Rangers football match when Lyons hitmen planted a tracking device on his car to stalk him. A convoy of Lyons associates pursued him at high speed through the streets of North Glasgow, reaching 100 miles per hour in a dangerous chase. Daniel desperately tried to evade, but the pursuers rammed his Skoda off the road, causing it to crash near an industrial area. Before Stephen Daniel could flee, masked attackers swarmed him and hacked his face with a machete. The blows were so vicious that paramedics initially thought he'd been shot in the face because chunks were missing. One police officer later testified, his nose was hanging off on the left-hand side near his ear. Miraculously, Stephen Daniel survived, but he required extensive surgery and was left permanently disfigured. Other brazen attacks happened during this period. In March 2017, Lyons-linked gang members reportedly opened fire on the Glasgow home of a Daniel associate, riddling it with bullets, though no one was injured. The following month, in Clydebank, an innocent man named Ryan Fitzsimmons was ambushed and slashed with a sword in a brutal assault. He later said it felt like the attackers were trying to chop the top of his head off. The attack was believed to be a revenge hit, as his brother Martin Fitzsimmons was awaiting trial at the time for attempting to murder Ross Monaghan. Several other members of the Daniel family or their associates were also targeted during this period in firebombings and assaults, all believed to have been carried out by the Lyons faction. It was a reign of terror intended to cripple the Daniel clan. Many victims and witnesses refused to name names, making police work difficult. As an investigator later noted, Those caught in Lyons Daniel violence often conveniently forget their testimony out of fear. Still, Police Scotland was determined to crack this wave of gangland warfare. By 2018, the law struck back. 6 Lyons associates were arrested and charged for the attempted murders of Stephen Bonzo Daniel and others. These men, including Andrew Dumbo Gallacher, Peter Bain, Brian Ferguson, John Hardy, Robert Pickett, were put on trial in Glasgow. In May 2019, all 6 were found guilty of a conspiracy to murder rival gang members and other violent offences. A judge sentenced them collectively to over 104 years in prison, a resounding victory for law enforcement. During sentencing, Judge Lord Mulholland stated,
"You sought to turn Glasgow into a war zone for your feud. This is a civilised country which is based on the rule of law. There is no place for this type of conduct, retribution or the law of the jungle."
One notable name on trial was Robert Pickett, a longtime Lyons henchman who, ironically, had been one of the Lyons casualties in the 2006 garage shooting. Now in 2019, he was being jailed as part of a Lyons revenge squad. Around 2019 to 2020, with many of their foot soldiers now imprisoned, Stephen Lyons, still in exile in Dubai, reportedly ordered a halt to further direct attacks. He was alarmed that the feud was drawing too much heat and costing too many loyal men to prison, instructing his remaining crew to stand down for the time being. But as before, the calm would not last. A new player was about to emerge, bringing a fresh wave of chaos and dragging international crime cartels into the Glasgow dispute. A younger gangster named Ross Miami McGill has risen to prominence in the Scottish underworld. McGill, 31, is a former Glasgow resident and reportedly an ex-Rangers football club hooligan who had relocated to Dubai in the late 2010s. From his Dubai base, much like Stevie Lyons, Ross McGill began building his own drug empire, with a crew known by the cryptic name Tamo Junto. The name is Portuguese for "We Are Together." McGill earned the underworld moniker Mr. Big, and also the nickname Miami due to a flamboyant lifestyle and frequent travels. Initially, established crime groups in Scotland didn't know what to make of McGill. He was an unknown quantity on the scene. Around 2021, McGill's path collided with the remnants of the Lyons-Daniel feud in an unexpected way. According to insiders, Ross McGill brokered a cocaine deal with some Scottish contacts, only to realise he'd been double-crossed. He sold a consignment of cocaine to a buyer, but the buyer paid him in counterfeit cash. McGill was furious and set out to identify who was behind the scam. He discovered the buyer was linked to none other than Mark Richardson, a notorious Edinburgh-based drug kingpin and a close ally of the Daniel crime family. However, by 2022, Richardson was in prison, serving an 8-year sentence since 2018 for major drug and gun trafficking offences. With Richardson locked up, his criminal enterprise was vulnerable. Sensing opportunity, Ross McGill approached the Lyons clan with a bold proposal. "Help me eliminate the Richardson-Daniel faction, and we'll all profit." In other words, an alliance. By this stage, the Lyons gang was somewhat depleted, and many senior members were abroad or lying low. An alliance with a hungry new gangster like McGill, who had money, foot soldiers, and international connections, was a way to keep pressure on the Daniels. What followed in 2022 to 2023 was an explosion of gangland incidents not seen in Scotland in years. McGill unleashed a wave of violence, particularly in Edinburgh, the Daniels' eastern stronghold, and then spread into Glasgow. His hallmark became firebombings and drive-by shootings, carried out very publicly. McGill's associates filmed many of their attacks and posted videos on social media, often set to music and with taunting captions. This was a campaign to strike fear into rivals. McGill's group ran a sophisticated, almost professional social media campaign alongside their attacks. By late 2023, there were dozens of incidents across Scotland's central belt. Homes and cars firebombed, businesses torched, and even family members of gang figures attacked. In one case, a taxi belonging to the father of McGill's girlfriend was firebombed in May 2024, evidently as a revenge attack by the Daniel side against McGill. Shots were fired into at least 2 homes in Edinburgh in early 2024, one of which had children inside. Another frightening case saw 4 coordinated firebombings in one night in April 2025. Attackers hit 4 properties almost simultaneously around Edinburgh. While no one was killed in those particular arson attacks, police noted that a child was sleeping in one of the homes targeted. It was sheer luck that no innocent people died. Scottish authorities publicly acknowledged the dramatic escalation in gang violence. By early 2025, over 100 officers were devoted to a task force investigating the firebombings and shootings. The police union warned that chronic underfunding made it hard to be proactive, saying frontline officers were stretched thin, trying to prevent further bloodshed. Still, detectives managed to make some arrests and promised more to come. Throughout this onslaught, McGill and the Lyons stayed mostly in the shadows, letting low-level operatives take the risks. Stevie Lyons remained in Dubai and reportedly coordinated with McGill remotely. Meanwhile, the surviving Daniel family members were largely on the back foot. Many had been attacked, arrested, or intimidated into silence. The Daniel crime group was a shell of its former self, yet its mere existence meant Lyons and McGill had a shared interest in stamping it out completely. A major factor fueling the longevity and reach of the Lyons-Daniel feud has been its entanglement with international crime networks, most notably the Kinahan Cartel of Ireland. The Kinahan organised crime group, led by Dublin-born kingpin Daniel Kinahan, is one of Europe's largest drug trafficking cartels. In the 2010s, facing intense pressure at home, Kinahan bosses relocated to the Costa del Sol in Spain, the very same locales where the Lyons leadership also hid out. This geographical overlap led to a strategic alliance. The Lyons crime family joined forces with the Kinahan cartel to import and distribute cocaine in Scotland. According to law enforcement and media reports, Stephen Lyons acted as the bridge to Kinahan. He cultivated relationships with the Kinahan bosses, eventually forming what was dubbed a Celtic cartel. One huge venture linked to this alliance was the MV Matthew cocaine shipment in 2023. In that case, authorities intercepted a vessel carrying €157 million worth of cocaine off the Irish coast. Investigators later suspected that Lyons clan members had helped coordinate that massive shipment for the Kinahans. Such high-stakes cooperation indicates how deeply enmeshed the Lyons became with the Irish cartel's business. A stark example of this came after the Costa del Sol double murder of Eddie Lyons Jr. and Ross Monaghan in 2025. These two men were known Kinahan allies by virtue of their Lyons membership. The Irish media speculated that their killings might drag the Kinahan cartel into a fresh mob war. While no definitive culprit has been named in the Monaghan Lyons Jr. murders as of this video, the international dimensions of the feud mean there are multiple possible angles. The double murder in Spain appears to be the climax, for now, of this long-running feud. Monaghan had set up a new life, running the Irish pub in Fuengirola, and Eddie Jr. was visiting him as a close friend and ally. As of mid-2025, the Lyons-Daniels feud remains an active and volatile situation. Over nearly 24 years, it has morphed from a local spat over a stolen stash into a sprawling conflict entangled with international cartels and new generation gangsters. It has seen at least 5 major murders and many more attempts, and it's likely far from over.